work and lunch and as much communication as one can do through masks. We're doing the best we can. So let me begin the afternoon again by simply saying we're looking at from this moment until around 3 o'clock. So I'd like to have integrated another period of centering prayer and have time for questions or there's other input that I also would like to share with you. So let's begin with, are there any questions? Just before we move into some new material. Well, I have two. Yeah, just a question. Could the overwhelming, incredulous recognizing, receiving of God's love for me be considered an emotional overload, resulting in tears? Well, what I would say that I wouldn't identify it so much as an emotional overload, but simply as an intensification, a felt intensification of God's love that you're becoming more and more aware of, and that can result or move into tears. You know, it's just so much, you know, and I think it's one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit, you know, the gift of tears. So rather than overload, that would be, I think, a bit too psychological to identify such an experience. And I would simply say, and I really feel most of us at one point or another have that kind of experience. It's just, wow. It's almost like a wow moment. But it's an intensification of God's love. And we just consent to that. And the consent may, result in tears. Is that okay? The other is, how do we engage our fellow believers who have had their faith shaken from constant setbacks and losses outside of their control? They no longer want to even attend church via Facebook. They agreed to learn Lectio, and then they kind of renege. How do we bring back those lost and frustrated brothers and sisters? Through example. It's like, you hear this all, so many people kind of leaving the practice of their faith. Don't you ever say they're not Catholic. Don't you ever say that. But the practice has sort of receded. And for any number of reasons, and who are we to judge? Thank you, Pope Francis. So I believe it's certainly in my own family. They really, and this may come as a surprise to you, but they all love their uncle, the priest. They really do, and they want me at everything. But they don't go to church. So what do I do? Do the best I can to share with them the love of God through my own presence. They're still at a point where, the new babies come along and they certainly want them baptized. And at least in my family, at this point, when the younger ones are getting married, they want, they would want me there to bless, to witness their marriage. So what I usually say at family affairs, when, before social distancing and have a wedding reception, and there'll be a good number of people there, and at some point I have to do two things. I have to say the blessing, and then I have to say a few words at some point. was aware of this. It was a cousin, a second cousin, who had been in this relationship for 25 years. And my niece called me and said that our second cousin was going to get married. And would I come and attend? So the day arrived. It was a Friday evening. It was going to be at the Hotel Hawthorne in Salem, Massachusetts. And I drove down from Lowell, and I was too late to go to the ceremony. And I think there was a justice, I'm not sure who was the officiant, but they didn't ask me to officiate, thank God. And saved me a little rough passage. And so I'm thinking to myself, wow, there's probably, just family members. And I got there and I'm waiting, I could see there were over 200 people. Two open bars, 200 people. And the wedding planner comes up to me and says, when do you want to give your blessing? And I said, well, you tell me. Well, her sister is going to give a toast. And then after that, you come up and give your blessing. I said, fine. And I'm in my clerical vest with my niece, my two nieces, and I was at a family table. And so finally, poor Erin, the bride's sister, is saying, is offering a toast. And the noise was beyond noise. It was just two open bars. Glory be to God. So then I'm invited to go up to offer a blessing. And I don't want to blow you out of the church, but I get up there and I said, quiet down. I yelled it into the microphone 3 times, brought the place to silence. And then I introduced myself and I said, my name is Father Bill Sheehan. I said, I'm the family priest. They bring me out for funerals, weddings, and baptisms. I said, I prefer weddings to funerals. And then I went on and offered it up. But I said, what's the big deal? You should have really let them have it. And that's just not my way. And it's not as though I'm in any way relativizing the importance of practice, the importance of the Eucharist, the importance of the sacraments. These are all gifts that God has given us. And I think, unfortunately, too many of us interiorize that as obligation. I've got to do it, I've got to do it, I've got to do it. And then finally you get tired of doing it. And so I think it has to, the whole issue has, and that's where I think, again, one of the blessings of the pandemic, we're coming back slowly, we have to make reservations, and it's like, wow, what does the Eucharist really mean? Recovering that, rediscovering that, I think that's what's going to happen over the long haul. And then, at least that's my optimistic outlook. But I would say, honestly, with those that are, somewhat distant, or it's your witness, it's your own love for your faith, and not preaching, but witnessing. I think that's the best we can do. At least that's my experience. Someone else, there may be different ways, and I honor that. But okay, anything else? Well, what I wanted to do before we have a period of centering prayer is, again, looking at some conceptual background. More now this afternoon for just a little bit Cynthia, an Episcopal priest who worked very closely with Father Thomas Keating in the 90s. And Cynthia now works very closely with Richard Rohr and the Center for Contemplation and Action. And she's just a wonderful spiritual teacher. And her latest book that I have on the chair is called The Heart of Centering Prayer. And it builds on centering prayer and inner awakening. But there's a couple of things that she says that I think are well worth repeating. And one of them would be in relationship to the practice. Does it make any difference?
Well, they can't see you.
I don't want to deprive them. In relationship to the practice, keeping in mind that centering prayer is a prayer of receptivity. And it is because it is a prayer of pure receptivity, we can kind of get lackadaisical. Just, So Cynthia would say, when you are embracing the practice of centering prayer, put teeth into your intention. Be clear about your intention. Really, really important. It's again not rigidity, it's clarity. Be clear about your intention, and our intention is to consent to the love, to the presence, to the action of God, closer to us than we are to ourselves. And then when the ego kind of gets in the way, return ever so gently to the symbol of your consent, but be clear. And then she places a great deal of emphasis, and this has been very helpful, similar to putting teeth into your consent, in other words, being present and consenting. The same dynamic unfolds with the letting go. When you become aware that you're caught up, with an emotional thought, image, insight, yield, surrender, let go. Put teeth into that letting go process. And then what she goes on to say, and this again, I've grown in this awareness just through the aging process. Cynthia basically would say that through fidelity to the practice of centering prayer, what begins to happen over the long haul is that you begin to cultivate a physical gesture of surrender. You absorb it into the body and into the psyche. And I don't know how well you're navigating the aging process. But from where I stand, the aging process is all about surrender. Physically, psychologically, and spiritually. Yielding, surrendering, letting go. When we begin to experience physical limitation, can we enter into that? It's part of the process, and it's a process of yielding, surrendering, letting go. So, again, from where I stand at this point, that probably has been one of the most helpful ways that's been offered to me in terms of what's it like to grow older. It's a process. And it's a process of diminishment. It's a process of letting go. It's a process of just being. Rather than I was talking to one of our men last night in the Outback in Lowell. Just come back from for 56 years as a missionary in Haiti. And he's living with us at St. Eugene. And since he's come home, he's been home about 6-7 months, he's had a number of health issues. Probably didn't take the time in Haiti to kind of pay attention. And so he's probably fallen 6 or 7 times in the last, say, 2.5 weeks. He was just over at the hospital over at Saints Memorial Thursday, going through, I think they were doing a CAT scan or something, and as he was leaving the hospital, he fell. So they had to take him back, and then we eventually... So I said to him last night, we were having supper, we were having some soup, and I said, Joe, do you think you want to use the walker? No. I said, Joe, you're falling. It's okay. Welcome to the club. But the walker will help you. The resistance. You know, and that's not a moral thing. I'm not making a judgment. But I'm just telling you what it's like. You know, and then, you know, the next issue we're going to have to face is driving, because his blood pressure is all over the lot. And they've told us he really shouldn't be driving. Well, if he's not going to take to a walker, you know, but that's what it is. I mean, we're holding on. You know, I mean, that's the human condition. And it's like, I really believe one of the, talk about fruits, one of the great fruits of a contemplative practice, as Cynthia describes, that yielding, surrendering, letting go, becoming more a part of who you are. I don't want to say it becomes easy, but it begins to make sense. You can begin to acknowledge your limitations. I'll say now to anyone, whether you ask or not, how do I know that I'm aging? You know, you're doing pretty well, they're pretty good. I'm stiff. And you might have noticed, you know, I'm fine, I can go up the stairs, but it's coming down. And so if there's something there I can hold on to, whether it's the pulpit or a railing, I will. You know, that's just the way it is. You know, so, you know, aging gracefully, again, in terms of your children, your grandchildren, I mean, to be able to witness to that is one of the greatest gifts you can offer to your family. You know, so there's a lot to this. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying? Yielding, surrendering, letting go. So that would be her first, when she speaks about the practice, as she describes it in the Heart of Centering Prayer, putting teeth into your intention and being very intentional about yielding, surrendering, letting go. And it becomes a physical gesture. And then the other part that I think is so helpful is that Cynthia begins to speak about the human condition. And she begins to describe what she identifies as the egoic operating system. And so she would go on to point out that as we grow and develop, we really are called to build up a healthy sense of egoic identity.
Could you spell that?
To develop a healthy sense of egoic identity. In other words, developing, you know, the gifts, the talents that God has given to us. You know, to let ourselves come into that sense of egoic identity in terms of these gifts, these talents that we bring. Where do we bring them into our relationships, whether that's in terms of marriage, our profession? So the egoic operating system involves that willingness to develop and to grow into a healthy sense of egoic identity. Now that's not the deepest source of our identity, but it's certainly a necessary part of what it means to grow and to develop into being a fully functioning human being. Eventually, our egoic identity begins to dissipate with the aging process. You know, what you might have been able to do at 35 or 40, you're no longer able to do at 75 or 80. There's that diminishment. Just be aware of that. And then she goes on to say, and I find a bit of fault in this, she goes on to point out that the false self system that we were speaking a little about this morning is part of our egoic identity, but not in its entirety. And so there's that both and element. But if you look at the teaching of Father Thomas over the years, he places so much emphasis in this building up of our over-identification with emotional programs, and then the two external sources, and the invitation to yield, to surrender, to let go. So it isn't diminishing or destroying the ego in its entirety. And that's the tension, the both and. The growth, the development, but also the willingness to let go of this false self-system that has become a part of our human condition. And that's the centering prayer, the welcoming prayer.
One of the issues, I guess, is that when you are growing up, you are taught to do certain things, whether it's for success, and then so you develop the ego, the identification of who you are, and yet my question, I guess, is as a younger person, as a teenager, for example, how do you match that with what parents, society expect you?
Yeah. Well, again, you know, without being overly simplistic, you do the best you can. You want to, you know, particularly with a youngster growing up, you want to be as affirming as you possibly can. You want to affirm that person in their core in terms of, and how do we do that? Well, as parents, and I cannot speak from experience, but, you know, as someone that's accompanied people, you know, younger as well as older, you want to affirm their gifts, their talents, go for it, develop that. You know, but in the process, even unconsciously, even the youngster will begin to fall into these emotional programs for happiness. You know, it's never enough. And so they're overcompensating, or they're just, you know, and so it's the both and then when you really, you know, are going along and deepening, hopefully, in your life of faith and your relationship with God, probably more toward the second half of life, you begin to become aware of this particular aspect of who you are. And that's where the spiritual practices, they're not making a judgment, oh, you're in a terrible place. What's the matter with you? It's like, well, how are you going to grow through this experience? And oftentimes the growth comes in relationship to, the letting go. So that when we are overly identified with our demand for affection, esteem, approval, it's never enough. And once we're able to begin to let go through the welcoming prayer or through the practice of centering prayer, we're able to receive the love of the other insofar as the other can expect. We don't have any great expectation. So it's working. It's really, I would say, centering prayer and welcoming prayer is more a second half of life experience. And not that, again, not that I don't want to over-exaggerate, but younger people, I've gone into, again, without being a name dropper, the Newman Center at Harvard and in BU, where you have younger people and they're wide open to this experience. But if they're in that kind of a grouping, you can tell that they're looking, they're searching, and they're much more available to the opportunity, So I say second half of life, but I never exclude, In fact, I just had a young fellow, I was hearing confessions last Saturday, as a matter of fact, at St. Joseph, the Worker Shrine in Lowell, that the Oblates, my community, administered. And this young fellow, married 2 or 3 years, come in and he's talking, and just opened up. So he's beginning now spiritual direction. He's really searching. Both he and the wife. I said, wow. So I was in the right place at the right time, So it's just, how is God calling you? That's not to isolate, but it's like, how is God calling you? How are you being called to grow? And that's wide open. You never arrive. You're always on the way. You're always going deeper. So Cynthia would speak about this egoic operating system. And then, and this I think is very important for people on the way or people into the journey, she speaks about the heart perception. And she goes on to describe the heart, that deepest part of ourselves, the heart as the organ of alignment. How are we integrating our lives? Certainly, to have the source of integration end at the ego is really allowing ourselves to be very superficial. Or rather, we're called to go deeper and to see the source of integration, the source of alignment, body, mind, and spirit coming together as a whole. That is the work of the heart. That's the work on this deeper level of our being. So the heart is the organ of alignment. The heart is the organ of perception, that intuition. I know that I know that I know, but I can't tell you how I know, but I know. The organ of perception, and what is most important for us in this context is that she goes on to point out that the particular quality of the heart is its capacity to listen. So when we suggest the invitation is to go deeper, spiritual practice like centering prayer brings us deeper because we're letting go, not in a judgmental way. We're simply letting go of the excessive activity of the ego. We're just letting it go. And in the letting go, we're able to be drawn deeper within the depths of ourselves. And then as we go deeper under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, we begin to listen. And this is the shift. Whose voice are you listening to? And St. Paul tells us in the 8th chapter of Romans, the great leveler, none of us knows how to pray. It is the Spirit of God praying in us. That's why we listen. We're called to grow up and to become fully functioning human beings. Listening to the movement of the Spirit. What is God's point of view? You know, God does have a point of view. Are you interested? Well, how do you discern that? By listening. Listening on the deepest level of the heart. So that, then she's not saying anything new. Because, again, within our tradition, we've always described that prayer is identified with a listening heart. So we try to help ourselves deepen in our capacity to quiet down and to listen. And to listen before we respond. And that's the art. That's the process. So that, I believe, is, again, nothing new. But her way of describing it I found extremely helpful. The organ of perception, the organ of alignment, and it's on that deepest level of the heart that we develop our quality of listening. Well, I'm not interested. Well, your choice. You can choose to stay rooted in the ego. And you move along and you are under the illusion, you're in control. What's the Father Thomas Keating years ago gave a wonderful image of the ego. He went on to describe that the ego, and check this out with your own experience. He went on to suggest that the ego is like a bridge that covers over the present moment. That's the image. The ego is like a bridge that covers over the present moment, so that if you are not in the present moment, at what end of the bridge are you expending your psychic activity? Are you the type of person that experiences themselves constantly ruminating about the past? Or if you're anything like myself, my tendency is to project into the not yet future. Oh, I'm going to get home Sunday afternoon and this retreat begins on Thursday at Zoom, and I've still got a lot of practice I have to go through before I'm projecting. Very natural, very normal, but you need to be aware of it. It's not the new normal. It feels normal, but there's more to be discovered. Interiorly, going deeper, finding the place of the heart, and listening attentively to how is the Spirit praying in you. How is the Spirit seeking to reveal to you at this moment in your life God's will for you? So it's all about relationship. But that's, so I found that description both egoic operating system and heart perception encapsulated within the human condition is just very, very helpful. And spiritual practice, whether it's centering prayer, whether it's the welcoming prayer, whether it's intentional breathing, all of those spiritual practices help us to grow and become more aware of heart perception. It takes us, in a good sense, out of the head. Why do we stay in the head? Because we feel as though we're in control. I'm miserable, but I'm going to handle on it. Let go. Go deeper. How is God seeking to communicate God's self to you in this moment of pandemic? What is God trying to teach us? Well, I think for myself, one of the lessons as I sat in my room during lockdown was my own powerlessness. I mean, I could choose to go out. I could choose to throw off the mask. I could choose to do whatever I wanted to do. But the virus is in charge until we get a vaccine. Trust the insight of the scientists. It's not the last word. And it might only be a probable opinion, but it's the best we can do at this point. And to reject that, I'm in control. Well, you're not. You're really not. And if the pandemic teaches us anything, hopefully, in a positive way, it will put things in perspective. You're not in control. You're on the way. You're following Christ. You're learning from Him as you take the time to listen. And that's why I, keep coming back to whatever's going on in your life, what's God's point of view? So there's so much, not so much learning, but so much by way of formation. We're being formed through this unbelievable worldwide pandemic. Who would have thought a year ago? Who would have thought? And here we are. Well, God's mad at us. Grow up. God is not angry. Richard Rohr goes so far as to say there's no anger in God. Oh, really? Yeah, I believe that, because God is love. So that way of describing the human condition as Cynthia does, I think is very, very helpful, and would be in the heart of centering prayer if you wanted more conceptual background. And I would just take it a little further. Years ago, Father Ray mentioned that years ago, in 70 to 73, I had the opportunity to do some graduate work with Father Adrian von Kamm at the Institute of Formation and Spirituality at Duquesne University. And Father von Kamm, who founded this institute, was a Dutch Spiritan, Dutch priest of the Holy Spirit, his community, experienced the Nazi occupation of Holland during the Second World War, never was imprisoned or anything like that, but it had a profound effect on him. And he went on to get his degree in psychology, in theology and philosophy, and then was instrumental in founding the School of Existential Psychology at Duquesne University. And then out of all of that background, that interdisciplinary background, von Kamm Institute of Formative Spirituality. And he went on to speak about body, mind, spirit. And one of the insights that he mentioned that I've never forgotten was he said that ultimately what we are called to allow to happen in our lives is that the ego becomes a servant of the Spirit. So rather than overemphasizing, our egoic operating system, which is, it's like, okay, that's part of who we are. But as we go deeper, through the grace of prayer, as we're brought more deeply into this experience of our union with God, and we're encouraged to listen, well, it's through the listening, slowly but surely, that the ego, rather than being dominant, becomes a servant of the Spirit. Isn't that beautiful? And again, you can't make that happen, but you can enter into a process that allows the Holy Spirit to bring you to that point with your consent. And that's fidelity to spiritual practice. Is that all right? Any questions or anything I could I had just found that, and again I think it's part of the aging process, just that awareness. And the ego is okay, very okay. We don't have to beat up the ego, but it has to find its rightful place. And it's a servant. It's not dominant. The gifts and the talents we bring to our life of service. What's our life of service? What did Jesus say? Love one another as I have loved you. It's the service of love. That's what we're called to do. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, now you do. No, I don't mean that sarcastically. But we've muddied the waters. We've complicated things beyond. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, who do you think you are? You come forth from God in response to God's unconditional, immense love. Brought forth into being in response to God's love and the interaction of our parents. A blessed moment, a blessed event, but it was rooted and grounded in love. And in response to that love that upholds us at every moment of our existence, we're called to respond. And we're called to respond, in the words of St. Teresa of Calcutta, to put love in the situation. Don't judge. Choose the path of love. We can only do that to the degree that we're grounded and rooted in this relationship with God. So, why don't we, are there any questions? And we'll take a stretch break, and then we'll have a period of prayer, and then I'll say some concluding thoughts and take any questions that you might have. So why don't we stand? center to allow that intentional breathing to kind of quiet you down. So breathe in through the nose, fill the diaphragm, exhale through the nose, and on the intake, silently say acceptance. On the exhale, surrender. You're surrendering to the love, to the presence, to the action of God, unfolding at this moment in your lives. Breathe in, breathe out. Ruach, breath, is so important in relationship to our tradition. The breath of God. So let me just encourage you now to assume a comfortable position. And so as we prepare to begin our practice of centering prayer, let me just encourage you to have available what we describe as the sacred word, as the symbol of your intention to consent to God's loving and indwelling presence. And during this period of prayer, when you become aware that you're becoming engaged with thought or image or insight, simply allow the thought with its emotional commentary, the insight, and let it continue down the stream of consciousness as you gently return to the symbol of your consent. And so as we did this morning, I'll touch the gong 3 times, and then read a short passage from this afternoon. Will be Psalm 103. And then after the recitation of the psalm, I'll touch the gong 1 time, and we'll center for about 20 minutes. Bless the beloved, O my soul, and all that is within me, I bless your holy name. Bless the beloved, O my soul, and remember the goodness of love. You forgive our stubbornness. You heal our disease. You save us from the snares of fear. You crown us with steadfast love and mercy. You satisfy our every need and renew our spirit